Hello and welcome. I am Chris Allen, Executive Director of the Kenosha County Historical Society. I will be interviewing individuals for Kenosha Voices, an oral history project of the Kenosha History Center in conjunction with Kenosha Community Media. We hope you enjoy these interviews. I'm speaking today with Diane Giles, longtime reporter and journalist in the Kenosha area. Welcome, Diane.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, so we're going to talk again just about your time in Kenosha and your whole career as a reporter and journalist. Are you from Kenosha originally?
Absolutely, a fifth generation Kenoshan. My dad's first line came here in 1850, and the rest of them came in 1880 from my dad's side. So yeah, long time.
What neighborhood did you grow up in?
Let's see, between Sheridan Road and the tracks, which would actually was the corner of 12th Avenue and 64th Street.
Okay. What was the neighborhood like when you were growing up?
Pretty friendly. We knew all our neighbors by name. My parents had lived there quite a while before I was born, at least a decade or more, I think.
And what did your parents do for a living?
Well, my mom, when I came along, my mom was just a homemaker. I shouldn't say just a homemaker, shame on me. She did work at Jockey for a while before I was born, especially during World War II where they were doing the parachutes and stuff. And until at least my brother was little, because he was a model in a Jockey menswear show when he was like 4 years old. Oh, my dad worked at AMC. 35, 40 years, something like that. He started during the Depression. He was lucky enough to get into it then. And I want to say he retired in 71 or 73 maybe. I know when I was getting out of the house then and getting married, he was like, okay, now I can quit.
What schools did you attend?
Kindergarten at Durkee over on Sheridan. And then I went to St. James from 1st to 8th grade. And that was a unique experience. I'm kind of glad I had. Yeah. And then I went to Lincoln 1 year for 9th grade when we had the junior high system, and then to Bradford for the last 3 years.
You mentioned St. James was unique. Why? What made it unique?
Oh, the class sizes, I think, more than anything. Besides being taught by nuns, but you know, let's see, we had 40 to 50 students. I know when we graduated in '67, there were 50 students in our graduating class.
Wow.
And yeah, just one class of each. I think maybe 5th grade was split, but after us.
Now, getting into your young adult and adult years, you said you attended Bradford. What did you do post-graduation at Bradford?
Well, I ended up going to Gateway, which was called Kenosha Technical Institute at that time. I ended up going there because my boyfriend was going there. I wish I had do-overs on that. Not dating him, no, but do-overs on the going up to MATC, because I'd considered radio and TV broadcasting, and that probably would have been a better fit. What I ended up with was associate degrees in interior design, which I took because I liked art, but I wasn't really good at it.
So you didn't study really journalism at that point?
Oh no, advertising I did. I liked, you know, I did creative writing in high school. I did journalism in high school.
How did you make your break into the newspaper world?
That's a good story. I was doing genealogy work when I was about 27, 28 years old, because I wanted to know what Kenosha was like when all those family members, you know, had come so early. So I read everything I could get my hands on. Lyman, Kenosha Respective, Kenosha in the 20th Century were those two were the newer books at that time. And just everything I could find at the library and at the Kenosha County Historical Society at the time, because you were on 3rd Avenue. So one day, right about Halloween of '81, I was in there doing some research of this type, and Lois Stein was the archivist. And young guy in his 30s came in and asked Lois if she would do a local history column. He had an interest in local history himself, but he wanted to get somebody to write a good column. And she turned him down. And before he left the room, I stood up and I introduced myself. And his name, of course, was Lenny Palmer, and asked if I could give it a shot. And he said, yeah, bring him something. So I worked on a piece for like 2 weeks, polishing, and turned it in, and it ran. He liked it. And then I did another one, and then I think by the third column he says, here, I think I'd like you to write this. And at that point I thought, I got a column, yes.
So Lenny Palmer was starting a newspaper. What was that newspaper called?
It was the Bulletin. It premiered Thanksgiving week of 1981. And I think my first story then was in the second issue. Actually, he wrote the first Old Kenosha about a train wreck on the North Shore over on Washington Road. That was a tragic one, yeah.
So you were there right when that paper started. What was that like?
Kind of exciting, you know. Lois Stein had said to me afterwards, oh, don't do this. These newspapers come and go so fast. Happenings had just begun, I think, just before that. And there was another one called the Kenosha Times, who was around for a few months, and they had disappeared then. So, but I was more than willing to give this a shot, because that's really I was always kind of fascinated by newspapers, and I'd go to the Kenosha News through high school. You know, you go downtown for lunch when you're at that building, at the old Bradford building, and we look down in the window and see the printing press. And that was always kind of exciting. But I never would have dreamed I'd actually get to work at this newspaper and be a reporter. My life's just a dream come true.
So what type of newspaper was the Bulletin? Was it a daily, weekly?
Oh, no, it was a weekly paper. Came out in the early years, let me think. By 83 and 84, I think it would change to the Bulletin Midweek Shopper. And then after a year or so, it went like that for quite a while, till 93. And then the following year, it went to strictly the Bulletin. So we carried the Midweek Bulletin label for a long time.
Wow. Now, when you first started working there, what was a typical day like? What were your job duties? You know, you were mentioning you wrote the column. Did you do anything else for the paper at that point?
Not when I first started, but then in '84 I had a personal life change and getting divorced, and I needed some more money, so I began delivering newspapers for them. And this was a total market coverage, as they say, TMC. So everybody who had a porch or 2 mailboxes, you got 2 papers, all through the city. It was pretty well covered. I myself took some routes that were between Washington Road and 35th Street from 22nd Avenue to Sheridan. And Shagbark, Wood Creek, a couple other apartment buildings. And yeah, that was like 2,000 papers a week, and I could get it done in 12 hours pretty consistently. So it was hard work. When my son would come with me sometime, he was like 7, 8, 9 years old, and he'd deliver with me too. But yeah. So good. How did
that job progress? How did management change, during those early years with the Bulletin?
Oh, well, the first editor was Mike Schumacher, the author. He stayed for a while. And then I think, boy, I can't tell you who came next exactly, although we had a lot of columnists and not so many reporters back then. Our first circulation manager was Peter Barca. He was in college. And I don't know if he puts that in his resume, probably not. But he did work for some time, a few months, I'd say, with the Bulletin. And other than that was Lenny Palmer and his wife, Betty. And then soon into it, his dad, Don, also did advertising sales. After he closed up well, after he sold his bar, which was Spanky's. So he did that for a while. So it was kind of family orientated and family run.
And when you spoke with Lois Stein, she said these papers come and they go.
Yeah.
Is that what happened with the Bulletin?
No, it had a pretty long run. Lenny owned it until 1988. Things technology-wise were starting to change, and he had an iTech machine that, did all the strips, and we would do paste-up boards with him, which is also what the Kenosha News did at that time. But his iTech was getting older. He might have bought it used even. And, you can only put Band-Aids on stuff for so long, I think. So that was one incentive for him to sell it. Howard Brown was interested. And so United Communications Corporation, which owns the Kenosha News and the Zion-Benton News and the old Zion-Benton News, I don't think it exists anymore, the Barganeer, and then 2 TV stations and 2 daily papers, Kenosha News being one. Mm-hmm. And so we were, apparently he thought we were kind of competing with him, and so he just gave him a chance to knock one out or draw them in.
How did things change or stay the same after the purchase by United Communications Corporation?
Oh, some things changed. My pay changed. I was doing okay in '88, at least I thought, at $5.50 an hour. It probably wasn't, but that was better than I made at Nestle's at $2.50 an hour when I started back in the late '70s with that, yeah. And I got, insurance coverage, other vacations and stuff, other good stuff.
Did the paper itself change?
Yeah, a little bit, this title. One thing that changed after it got going was we had a unique kind of system that I think Leonard had figured out, which was a tabloid. These were all tabloid papers, or I should say happenings were stapled ones, I think. But it would be a tabloid newspaper, and then they would fold it in half. So you had a front page that said Midweek Bulletin across here. There would be an ad front page, when they see it, that's what people would pick up off the stand. And then when you opened it, it was another front page ad. So you had like 2 front page ads and then the back page of the whole thing. So he could get prime price for 3 different places. And then, of course, the full page ads inside, half page, quarter page. Mm-hmm.
Just to back up a little bit, where was the Bulletin located, I guess, at the beginning, and then did that, again, change?
Oh, yeah. We had plenty of places we moved to before the sale to Mr. Brown. We started on 58th and 6th Avenue on the something west, on the northwest corner. That had been Kresge Building, then it had been Jupiter. It might have even been Jupiter when we were there, upstairs on the upper floor. And from there we went to the Orpheum Building on the 2nd floor, right across, our windows are right across from the Dayton. And after that we moved to a storefront, again in the Orpheum Building. And yeah, and after that we had the move to Bisnow's. And I think, no, we were purchased while we were at the gosh, were we in the top floor? We might have stayed separate from the building quite a while. But eventually we ended up in Bisnow's, and then after that, we were in the basement of the news.
Basement of the Kenosha News.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was that like? Were you looked at as Kenosha News staff at that point?
Oh, no. No, they kept us, both, everybody was completely separate. We had our own paste up, we had our own, no photography work could be done there. But yeah, we had freelance photographers and me, and editorially wise, no, they did not mix at all. Although I did make friends with the editorial staff, because as the Bulletin, and circulation manager, I ended up in several places in the building, so I got to know a lot of people. So, you know.
Speaking about other staff, what was the interaction like between you and other staff at the Bulletin, you and management?
Yeah, I think I became associate editor early on in the game. Well, not early. I think I was associate editor and a distribution manager in '84 to '88, because then I took over the whole distribution of the paper for Lenny. I guess he thought I was doing 2,000 papers and getting it done properly every week, so he hired me. I said, great, more hours, I'll take it.
What was that job like?
Oh, it was hard, especially in the winter, in the pouring rain. We had to bag, things. We would, as distribution manager, I had a crew that I took, a crew of adults in Kenosha, that you would put the stacks on the corners out of the back of the van. And I had a crew leader that would drive the van and then drop the guys off in different sections and pick them up later. And then they either rubber band them or bagged them and threw them on the porch, depending on the weather. Yeah, it was an interesting time. But I learned a lot about people, about delivering newspapers.
And was that all within Kenosha, or was there a reach outside of the Kenosha area?
Oh, it was until '88, then, when United Communications bought it, and then they had a TMC product called the Bargaineer, and that was run out of the Zion building. So that was a different crew. That was kids in middle schoolers, and I took them, putting stacks on bags of Bargaineers on the corners, and they would do the same thing, kind of. But I learned an unusual, a sad lesson there, when I took my crew of kids. We had 2 adults on that too, on that crew. And a couple of guys that really probably couldn't have worked much more during the week than that. They had other problems, but they would come along. And I was going to put a couple of kids, giving them assignments in the van. Okay, you guys take this route, you guys take that one, I'm going to drop you over here and you're there. And the kids suddenly all jumped up and said, no, you can't do that. And I said, what are you talking about? You can't put these 2 African kids that were on the only 2 we had, I guess, in that neighborhood, and I thought they were yanking my chain, But one of the adults said, no, don't do that to them. They'll get beat up within a couple blocks. The phone tree is going to start ringing. This is Winthrop Harbor. And don't do that to them. I said, okay. But that was a real awakening to me. And then I talked to some of the guys on my adults on my crew in Kenosha, and they said, oh yeah, if we get a flat tire, we don't, we walk out of there. We won't stay there after dark. And this is 1988. That just blew me away, how that could still be going on. And it could be still going on today. Don't know.
Going back to, again, we're in '88 now. The company is purchased by United Communications Corporation. Mm-hmm. How does the company culture change? Is there any kind of change in the culture at the Bulletin?
Somewhat. Being that this was kind of like a mama papa newspaper to begin with, we had picnics together. Some of us had families. We would always bring. In fact, later on, I'd say in the mid to late, maybe '86 or so, one of our receptionists and her husband had some land up near the Merrimack Ferry, and they had a boat. They water skied. They were water skiing fans and taught their kids to water ski, and we went the whole crew went up there for a weekend with, you know, tent camping on their land and riding the boats and water skiing. And, you know, at other times we had picnics when we became Kenosha News, but nothing like that, you know. And we'd have a Christmas party every year, pass around the cigars.
Did the Bulletin have a union or a guild?
No. Nope. We were very small. I mean, I was the only writer sometimes, as it later got into that, yeah.
Did they ever try to have a, did they ever
Not
try
a
to form
bulletin.
it?
No,
Okay.
not, that did happen after 1988. And, gosh, I don't know when it was that we had 3 reporters, and it was after 92. 3 reporters, and we were in the basement of the News, and our editor at that time, Darren Hillock, who was a wonderful guy, he now has West of the Eye. I think the world of him, and he taught me so much about newspapers too. You know, he was telling us that you guys write as good as they do upstairs, and he sent us for training and stuff, and so we come to believe it. We've, you know, want to advance ourselves too. So we were talking to guild members on the top floor outside of the building, you know, went to lunch with them. And they gave us cards to sign if we wanted to. So the 4 of us signed the cards. And at that time, they were apparently about to make me an editor, which is salaried. So that knocks me out. Then we got 3 people left. The other reporter, Mary Pat, left. Can't remember her last name. And then Jane Watkins was there, and we had an editorial assistant by the name of Pat Christensen. And so as soon as we did this, the major change was they didn't want us in the building. We got shipped out to Paddock Lake, you know, in a house with an outstair wooden staircase that led up there. There's like 3-4 rooms up there. That's all they had. I don't even know if we had a kitchen sink. We might have, but we were exiled. And when the time came for the vote, it was just going to be Pat and Jane, and one voted for it, and the other one voted against it, and that was the end of it. It's a tie. So you can't have a guild with just one member.
And now you're out of the Kenosha News building.
Yeah,
You're in Paddock
for
Lake.
9 years. We did move next door. Well, first we were upstairs in the house, and then the lower part. This is the building that Larry Zamba had for many years in Paddock Lake, on the, well, I gotta think now, south side of Highway 50. But then there's a little strip mall to the east of it, and then we got into a place in the strip mall. But still, you know, we were being punished, I do believe.
What were those years like? Was Darren Hillock the editor during that whole time?
Yeah. He had a desk out there. But he also, I can't remember if he was executive editor, I think, of the Zion Benton News. So he had they had a great managing editor, and she knew how to run everything. But still, you know, he had that title. He had to take care of that, and then us poor slobs.
And speaking of the paper itself, you mentioned there's 3 main advertising sections with, you know, those headlines. What else was inside the paper?
Oh, we have columns. Gosh, over the years, well, we had gone fishing for like forever, and in fact, the Kenosha News, that's the one column of Bill Kloster writes that's picked up, and I know it could be still running. I'm not sure. They wanted something like that. We had a sports columnist. We had Old Kenosha, that, of course, that I kept writing. Genevieve Turk. I don't know if she was an old timer from Kenosha, kind of gruff lady, and she alternated with me on weeks for a while. But she just wrote her own editorial type pieces, and Lenny had his 2 cents worth, his column. We had a cooking, our typesetter did a cooking column. Cheryl Becker had that. Susan Morgan was a great writer, and she did all kinds of story. I think she had have a gardening? She might have had a gardening column. The Green Thumb, yes. And then, of course, we have some that weren't really from Kenosha, like Marlena, the rock lady who was in Lake County. It was our horoscope in the back, and she would send it to us each week. One time, she sent me, and then I go to check it out, and I realized she sent me the wrong week. This is the week of the next one, you know, or something. And so I called her and said, yeah, you sent the wrong one. You want to send me the right one? She said, nah, just leave it. Okay.
There was a feature in the paper called Sound Off.
Oh, yeah, there was. That became pretty popular. Oh, when was that? Boy. It came on pretty easily.
Yeah.
It was a line, a telephone number that we gave out, and you could call, and for maybe 30 seconds or so, you could sound off. You could give your opinion on anything. You could make comment on something. You could, you know, within limits, of course, but it was a lot more lenient than, let's say, the Voice of the People in the Kenosha News, which insisted on having a name attached to everything. This had no name. You don't know how many times a person's calling in, you know, and it could get pretty wild. Let's see, Lou Regani had the recorder at his house, and he would type it all up, and then he'd give it to us, and then we would put it back in the typesetter. So we had decisions on the fly, what stays, what goes. And then later on, because it continued, I think, for a while, after the UCC bought it. And then I'd be putting on the headphones, or Pat Christensen did too, and then we'd be typing it up. And more than once, my headphones tossed across the room. In disagreement with their opinions, but I didn't. That doesn't mean unless they were nasty or really, liable.
And that was a well-known section for.
Oh yeah, it went on 4, 5, 6 pages in between the ads. Yeah, it was very popular. People remember Sound Off.
And people definitely remember the old Kenosha stories as well, and the old Kenosha column. How did that evolve over the years?
Oh, that I started, weekly, and I flip here. It was started out as Old Kenosha in November, or was it November or December, the second issue in 1981, and then it went all the way with that name until July of 2004. Then I was into the Kenosha News when I got hired there, and that's another story too. But when I got hired there, I wrote Historic Life once a month, I think, or could have been weekly, I'm not sure, but for Kay Jones, because she was the editor of the Life page, so it ran in the Life page stuff. And then it ended in 2006. They decided, no, we don't want that anymore, and they put me onto other things. Well, that lasted about 9 months, and the readers were like, oh, where's that old Kenosha? We like that. So, the upper management said, yeah, we're going to put that back in there. I'd like you to write that again. And I was just tickled. So the incarnation of it became History Mystery, and that ran for quite a while. You post the question in the beginning, and then you answer it. In the beginning, I started posting next week's question at the bottom and not asking the question the following week until somebody pointed out to me, ask it again, because people forget in a week. Well, yeah, all right. That made perfect sense then. And then I had a monthly column at the same time called That History Column. Real inventive there. Then we went to Archival Revival, and in 2018 it went back to Old Kenosha, and then when I retired, oh wait a minute, that's not true. It was Archival Revival until 2016, and then I retired. That's what I did. Yeah, retired and in December of that year, and then I couldn't write it anything. They said, well, we'd like it back, but we just, you can't do anything for us for a year, tax reasons, whatever. I said, okay. So the next year came back in 2017, then I said, yeah. Oh, in 2018, I started writing it again, and I have been ever since on freelance.
What has been your methodology with the history column? How do you get your ideas for it? How do you research it?
Oh, there are endless stories out there. I think the stories are the things that make it tick. I don't like dry history, and I hope I don't read it off that way. Sometimes I tend to get into more dates and things like that. Chronological order is very important to me in a story. But I look for that wow factor, like, wow, Thomas Jeffrey had the first steering wheel. That was his invention, or his family, that went into those early Ramblers or Jeffrey mobiles. Things that people may not be familiar with,
Do readers ever encourage you?
Oh yeah, they give me, they have over the years. Some of them I dive right into, and other ones are just too hard to research, especially before newspapers.com. Oh my gosh. You'd have to look through, well, I did find a way around that. I would go to the end of the year in the Kenosha News, and they would have a roundup. And then I found out when I was working for the Kenosha News that, because they had a whole thick book of them, they had cut up issues, slapped them on paper, but you could go through and see every day what the main headlines were for quite a few years. And so that was a big help when I found that out. But still, there's so many stories, and I just peruse now on the newspapers.com that I see, oh, well, that's a good one. Or I'm researching something else, and I'll come across it. And, jot it down and the date. This is, for another one.
Now, you touched slightly on technology change. Newspapers.com obviously wasn't around in 1981.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit more about how technology has changed with your job specifically and how you use it? And then also, kind of in the whole newspaper world, technology certainly has impacted newspapers.
Yeah. Well, technology-wise, yeah, I also did the darkroom work in the early days of the Bulletin. And that's something Lenny Palmer taught me, how to develop film and then print the film and make, put it on the enlarger and make them the right size. And that's when we were upstairs in the Orpheum building. And we didn't even have, I'm not sure we even had a refrigerator. I'm pretty sure we didn't. So I would mix the developer, and that stuff all has to be done at a certain temperature when you start applying it to the film, when you're doing the pans with all it. And I would mix it up in ball jars, canning jars, quart ones, and but you got to get it at the right temperature. So I took to putting it, there was a bathroom at the end of the hall. I mean, a bathroom that any tenant up there could use, of course. And I would put it down in the toilet and watch the thermometer. And when I got to the right temperature, I'd take it out and then use it. I got pretty good at that. Little dicey, but I'm brave. Put gloves on, yeah, it helps. Yeah.
And were you typing on a computer at that point when you were writing your stories?
No. Yellow legal paper in the beginning, and I would actually do the cut and paste of taking the scissors and then rearranging the paragraphs, taping them back together. Yeah, that's better. I like it better that way. And then typing it up or turning it in for someone else to type it up. Lucky, they could usually read my handwriting.
Yeah. So definitely things have changed over the years, obviously. Yeah. When you talk about the whole industry, as a whole, the newspaper industry, what other technology changes have impacted how you would do your job, but also, just as a whole and how things have changed?
Yeah. Well, the computers were definitely a part of that. I think we got our first Macintosh when, and it was for Betty Palmer to use because she was using it for bookkeeping. But then we got into, using that with the flat 3-inch drives and saving our stuff on that. And then when we got into Kenosha News and was working there, when every time the Kenosha News would get a new system going for their editorial department on the first floor, or on the second floor, we'd have to learn it too, because that's how things are going to get the layout was all done by another department. We didn't do layout at that time. That was something that got sucked into the Kenosha News, and they were just going to do it all for us. So yeah, those were some hard times for learning new systems and getting aggravated, but I liked what I liked, and change is not always easy for me.
The Bulletin went through some changes also. It went through name changes. It also went through some format changes.
Yeah.
Eventually it got folded in with the Kenosha News as well.
Yeah, it was an insert to the Kenosha News for a while, and then as a tabloid, and then I think it went into the Kenosha News and was called the Bulletin Plus, and that was full-size sheets that were just put into the newspaper once again as a separate section to the news. So it could all be, I think it was all printed as one then. And yeah. So
now at that point, was the Bulletin staff still separate, or were those now Kenosha News employees?
When we stopped with the Bulletin Plus in 2004, and at that time it was the end of the Bulletin altogether. A couple of us, Darren Hillock and I, and Patrick Uphill, who was doing layout, and by layout by that time was all done on computer, and he was a whiz at it. He was really good. They came into the Kenosha News. Everybody else,
What was that transition like? Did you have to, were you just now all of a sudden a Kenosha News employee? Did you have to reapply?
Oh, I had to reapply. I think my entrance date was April 1st, 1988. And I had to reapply. There was a period for 3 weeks. I wasn't sure if I was gonna, have a job or not.
The 88 date, now that's United Communications Corp, correct?
Yes.
So,
yes.
And then 2004 is when?
Oh, yeah, I got that backwards then. 2004 is when they just decided to not print the bulletins. And we had a couple of reporters, one would leave, and then we're going to suck it in and we're going to keep going without this reporter. Then it happened a second time, and we're like, holy crap, all right, we can do this. We've done it before. We'll just nose to the grindstone. And well, the whole thing was that they knew what was coming, and they were just lessening the burden, a little bit more.
So in 2004, you apply for a job with the Kenosha News.
Yes, I'm so sorry.
No, you don't need to apologize. What is that like? You're already working in newspapers. You're already working for a publication.
But all I have is an associate degree in interior design. I'm going up to the big leagues here, trying to get in, where everybody has, a bachelor's degree, and I was the only one. I did get in, but I was the only one without one. So I guess I got my training in life, like the old ads with Abraham Lincoln used to say years ago.
Was there an application? Was there a test?
Yes,
was there an interview?
Yes. I had to apply for the job. I had to take the tests. One of the tests I think was just, was punctuation. Another test was on taking paragraphs of stories and put them in the right order. And I had learned all about what a nut graph was and how you put that up, fourth sentence at least, the second paragraph, no more than that hardly. You got to get that information out there. You have a lead, but you need your nut graph in there. So it was things I'd already learned, and they said, "You're fine, come on in, welcome." And they did. They welcomed me. It wasn't a thing of, well, you're from the Bulletin. I never felt that at all with the people up there. They were very nice.
At that point, 2004 and the next few years, who were the upper management at the Kenosha News? What was that like? Who did you report to?
I reported to Craig Swanson. He was the editor there. When I first got there, he called me in on a meeting to get to know me a little better and stuff, and he wanted to know, what I do. He knew about the column, but he didn't know what else, other things I had an interest in or could do. And he asked me an odd question at the time, which I'd never had to think about before, was, well, do you know anything about sports? And I'm thinking, oh my God, he's going to make me know. I was a little panicked at that. But I did say, well, I know a bunt from a punt. And he thought that was a good answer. And but I never had to do sports stories. Okay. That's fine with me, because we had a great sports department.
What beats did you cover?
Let's see. Oh, county board was way late. I did. At the Bulletin, when we went out, I have to back up. While we were out in Paddock Lake, our focus, we had a Western Kenosha County edition, in which we would cover Twin Lakes board, the Lakewood school boards, all the little school boards, because they were all their own districts out there, and then the Wheatland Council or Town Board, so all those little things. That's what we went for. Didn't have to do that so much out there because that wasn't their big focus, and they had been doing all the Kenosha stuff all the time. So. I hit human interest stories, my column. Boy, now I have to really stop and think. See, those I didn't save. I kind of, there was endless of them. By the time I was finished, I was doing 5 to 7 stories a week. Some of them were just simple rewrites, but other ones were definitely interviews, and I did man on the street stuff with a camcorder, asking people's opinion about stuff. They wanted that, and so I did that, but they had a video component at that time. So,
and now working for the Kenosha News, what was the company culture like at that point? Were there company picnics? Were there,
Oh, yeah, there were company picnics. They had their annual party at the Elks Club, which was extravagant and wonderful. I have really pleasant memories of going that and watching Bob Zuznik and his wife. He was the maintenance man there, and his wife danced, because boy, they were good dancers. I enjoyed that. Yeah.
Were there teams? Were there bowling leagues, softball teams?
Yeah, there's softball teams called the Collect Runs that was there for quite a while. Once in a while there'd be fundraising things that we would, let's pull a team together and raise some funds. Well, I was on a basketball team, which was awful because I didn't play basketball ever. But I do like sports. Remember flag football one time in Library Park. I have no idea what that was all about.
Now, going all the way to the top, there's a name that's synonymous with the Kenosha News, and that's Howard Brown.
Absolutely.
Did you have any interaction with Howard over the years?
Yes, I did. He had an open door policy. He didn't have to, it's good to stop and talk to his secretary, Matty Hallbrecht, to see if he was back there. But if his door was open and he's not on the phone, you could, knock on the door and come on in and sit and talk to him. He was very personable. He was a wonderful, caring man who was very generous with his people. Like later on, when he'd have a birthday, he was giving checks, 150 for part-timers, maybe 200, to everybody who worked for him, not just at the news. I'm talking to 2 TV stations and all the other newspapers, all the weeklies, the dailies. It was really touching. Yeah.
And of course he's involved with the Christmas parties and some of that as well. Yeah. How did the news change over the years? From 2004, you mentioned earlier in the interview, you retired in 2016.
Yeah.
How did it change in that dozen years or so?
Well, there was some really hard times, I think, for the news. We tried to do different things, but but it wasn't working. So we tried doing video reports every day. And then they decided that took too much manpower, that they didn't want that, so they canceled those again. But those, when I would do like Man on the Street, I'd have the camcorder and I'd talk to these people that said yes, and then I would set up the tripod and talk to myself on the camera, which was okay because I could edit myself. If I didn't like the way it turned out, which was quite often, I could just redo it.
And again, getting closer to that 2016 retirement, how did things change at the very end there? What was, I guess, included in that? What was the relationship like with the guild at that time and management? You were part of the guild, obviously being a Kenosha News employee.
Yeah, they were trying to cut down the newsroom, and they were trying to eliminate a lot of stuff that was going on. It touched every department too, that they were cutting back and cutting back. That was after Howard died. It was cutting back even more because they were trying to get it, his children, and were trying to get it in line to sell it. So you'd have like a hatchet man kind of come in. He had his job, and we knew he had his job, but it wasn't pleasant at all. In fact, Joe Pateni was the editor when they came in and said, we need to cut the newsroom. And rather than do so, Joe resigned. Didn't say goodbye to anybody, he just was gone. And that was then, that's heartache, not only because, you can't fight what's happening, and you can't, even our beloved editor is, won't be there anymore, but it's so discouraging, Okay, I guess we are going to get cut, and at some point, what's going to happen? And we had always said, what's going to happen when Howard dies? We just, it was always a little bit in limbo, but after he died, we knew stuff was going to change. And the whole industry was changing too at that time. USA Today had been there for quite a while, but newspapers in general were cutting back and going to 3 days a week instead of dailies, and yeah, it was crazy.
So you retire in 2016, you take that year off, and then you're back to writing a column for the Kenosha News.
Yeah.
And that column is called?
Old Kenosha, went back to our original name.
Yeah. Over those years of the Bulletin years and into the Kenosha News, what's the best part of your job?
Oh, well, meeting people. Not all my stuff comes with a personal intervention, thing, but I would get a tip on something, and from a woman who was there for the explosion at a Wisconsin Fuel, was it? That she had lived in the house next door and was a kid and remembers her mom running out the door with a parakeet cage. And their house was on fire, and a big hole in the backyard. And then I was able to find pictures. It's always good if I can find pictures. And a lot of times at the Kenosha History Center, there they are, just waiting for me to find them.
And you've had some very popular stories. That we know there's fans out there that enjoy your stories. What are some of those stories that you've gotten the feedback from?
I think one of the most successful ones was WPA toy loan. I think I went back and wrote about it a second time because it had such a response from people. The WPA toy loan was took place in many places, including Kenosha, where during the Depression, the kids, they couldn't afford toys to buy your child. So you could go to like a library of things, but just toys, this toy loan. You could sign out for them for a week, and take home a pedal car or a tricycle or a bike or, a dolly buggy. All these kinds of things, which I had never really heard about, but once, I put some of it out there, I got an explosion of people who remembered it, and a family who had pictures of the kids, in the toy loan toys, playing with them, Well, can't get better than that.
Do you ever get fan mail?
Yeah, I've had several people over the years, I would get stuff from. One was, yeah, the guy out in California would write me, Olander. Well, I can't think of his first name now, but he would, Al, I think it was Al, yeah. He would send me stuff, and he was in his 80s or 90s, and he would handwrite stuff, shaky handwriting, on big pieces, 11 by 17 paper, and send it to me. And some of them were great stories, and I did run with them in my column, and he was tickled about that. But I think he was just getting down and out pieces of his life that, because some of it didn't include Kenosha, him as an adult traveling out west. But we got to be, and then the letters stopped coming, and I imagine he just couldn't do it anymore, or he was gone, one of the two. There was another one before him in Kenosha who kind of freaked me out in the beginning, because I had something about ghosts I had put in the paper, and he sent me a picture back. It was a Xerox copy of something. Then he had taped like little things on it, like a cat, like a cat on top of the tombstone, and something else, and then it had my name on it. And I'm thinking, what is this guy wishing me harm? His name was Ed Kamen. And, then I got to understand it's Ed's sense of humor, And he would correspond with me once in a while and give me some good ideas. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ed Werner used to give me, he would do research, for everything on the lighthouse. And when he found something he thought was interesting that I could use, he'd, copy an extra copy of that and circle it and then hand it to me, I still have a lot of stacks.
So for over 40 years, you've been a big part of the community here.
Oh, yeah.
And sharing those stories. Why do you think it's so important to have a newspaper in town?
Oh, local newspapers, it's one of those things, until you lose them, you don't know what you got. Because it's these kinds of, newspapers that do the investigative reportings. They not only do that, but they also do reportings they're the ones that go to the county board meetings and to the city council meetings. And they keep an eye on, the budgets. They would do stories on the budget. When they go, who's going to fill that void? And that's when, we could be in really trouble, I think. Like, just not long ago, George, and I know you know what I'm talking about, George, not Soros, Santos, George Santos. Yeah, he was kind of found to be, not telling truth in his campaign because a little newspaper in New York, found it out and printed something about it. And then the New York Times says, oh, we didn't know that. And then they took off with it, So it's stuff, we're important. Newspapers are important.
And you mentioned the best part of your job is the people.
Yeah.
Do you still interact with some of your coworkers?
Yeah, from Kenosha News. Oh, yeah. In fact, I sat a seat away from Liz Snyder and Rex Davenport from the News the other day just by chance. And that was pleasant seeing him. Maybe I'll see him again, but, And then I go to their Christmas party at years. I still get an invitation to that. So I get to see the people. They all come to that one. I like that.
So a chance meeting at the Kenosha County Historical Society in '81 with Lenny Palmer turns into just a wonderful career.
Yeah, boy, I couldn't have wished for my life to go any better. A chance encounter, and that's, you never know. You just never know. So you got to put yourself out there, kids. Words of wisdom to younger ones. Don't be afraid to, if it's something you like and you think you can do well, find a way. Find a way.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Diane.
Thank you for inviting me. I had a great time.